And so when you log in initially, you're going to be on a screen usually that looks like this. This is kind of your, I guess you'd call it kind of your desktop, okay? It's going to have, for me, it has a button where I review documents, but for you guys, it might have things like how do I manage my listings or manage my transactions. When you want to go into the templates that we're going to be talking about, you want to go click on this apps up here, and then you're going to go into forms. So when you click on forms, it takes you to a whole nother platform essentially. Okay. And in this platform, you're going to see other transactions that you've been working on. So this is kind of the desktop of forms. So you'll see like I did a test one just because I was helping out an agent and kind of teaching them. But Carol does a lot of the back end stuff for our team. And so she will set up these buyer agreements, these listing things and whatnot. And so what we've done is we've created templates. And up here, you'll see the files. And then the second button over is templates. So when you click on templates, what it's going to do is it's going to show you, first of all, what you've already created. Okay. Secondly, it's going to show you where you can create a template, which is the tab right next to My Templates. So if you click on Create a Template, it's going to take you through some steps. It's really nice and easy to understand. It's very intuitive. So it's not like it's, oh gosh, what's my next step? I got to look over at a video over here. No, you just click into templates and you say, create a new template. Now it comes down to what kind of template do I want to create? Is it a buyer? Is it a seller? It's pretty rare that we as real estate agents use a landlord template, but SkySlope does handle landlord tenancy things. And so there are other types of forms that you could use. These three are the ones that you are very unlikely to use. So we're really going to keep to seller or buyer. And let's say we click on, let's click on buyer. And then you're going to go down here and click on next. And then you're going to name the template. Okay. I'm just going to call this test template so we get through this part, because I'm going to actually go into one of my templates and show you all the forms that I've pulled up and how I do that. So this test template then takes you to where you add forms, okay? And when you add forms, the nice thing is you can do one of two things. What I've done in the past, oh, that's my wife calling. We're going to put her away for a while. I have to call her back. But we're going to, actually what I will do is open up SkySlope again. And what I'm going to show you here is kind of the backside of what you should be able to see and what I can see as your principal broker. So this is on the transaction side. This is what you guys can go into in order to see where your transaction is at, what you're still missing, and what you've got turned in. This is an example of a buyer that I'm working with. I've turned in his buyer representation document, and then all of his sale documents and whatnot, disclosure documents below that. I obviously have turned this in, and the principal broker, being myself, will have to review that. So even I have to turn in paperwork for me to review later. Pretty sad, right? So that's, and this is where too, even our accounting team they'll put in the closing documents to verify that, hey, yes, it actually has closed. We've received a check. We've paid out to the agent. And so they file all of this kind of stuff in one area. But to go back over to forms, this is where we want to look at what's required in our checklist, and then what is it most likely we're going to use, and put that into our template for buyers and for sellers. Make sense so far? Anybody have any questions? I'm going to pause here for a sec and make sure that you don't have any questions so far.
I'm good.
You good? Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is, instead of working on a buyer template, I'm going to start working with a listing template. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to get out of this test template. I'm going to just go ahead and delete that because we'll go through it again these are the two major ones that Carol and I have. She actually set up this one and it looks like it has 0 forms in it. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But I'm going to go into the listing team packet. We call it the source team listing packet. We have 17 forms in there. So if you click on that, you can at any time you can update information in this, so you can change your templates as you go. And maybe there's something where you're like, oh gosh, I keep having to check the same box every single time. That's kind of a standard question I always answer for my clients and put on this particular document. So when I set this up, I basically went through what is it I'm required to have by the company. And then what are other documents that maybe I use as Trevor Arian source team to highlight who we are and what is our item of, or what is our value as a team as opposed to another agent. So the first thing is I'm going to have my list of required documents. So initial agency disclosure pamphlet, right? That's that 3-page pamphlet that we have to give to both buyers and sellers that talks about agency relationship. It's a 3-page document, and there's different, what should I say, different versions of this, okay? So you can find this. I pulled up, and I like to use the form I'm most familiar with because I'm an OREF document guy when I can be. But there are certain documents that I'm going to point out to you that are probably the company and myself, we prefer you use the Oregon Realtor form. So I'm going to show you the difference in this situation. So on the Oregon Real Estate Agency disclosure pamphlet, you can use either one because these are standardized by the state. And so basically verbatim, word for word, they're just formatted differently. Okay, so you could use this one, or you could, let's go and look, let's pretend we're going to add a form. I could go to up here where it says libraries. I can go to the Oregon Realtor forms and look up disclosed limited agency agreement. So let's pretend we're going to add this. Okay, look how it's the same title. It has the same kind of information, and then it has, oh, this is the disclosed limited agency agreement. My bad. We're going to go backwards. Let's go back to the templates. Real estate agency, initial agency, that's what I need to look up, was initial agency. So I'm going to add forms, Oregon Realtors initial. That's what I wanted to look at. INITI. So see how there is the Oregon Realtor forms, they break it down into 2 different ones. They make one that's for sellers and one for buyers. So I could click over here and say add, and then I can continue. And then that initial agency disclosure pamphlet is right here. It's basically the same document, has all the same verbiage in it. It describes who the seller's agent, buyer's agent, and it places opportunities for people to initial on each page. But it basically is the same information, just formatted differently. So you can use either one of those, right? I'm going to take this one out because our team does not use this one. There we go.
It said the company prefers the Oregon forms instead of the OREF.
Typically, yep. But it really, again, because this is a standardized form by the state, it doesn't matter which one you use. So we don't have a preference on this form. Okay. The next one I'm going to show you is disclosed limited agency agreement. So this is where we basically have the client sign saying they've received this pamphlet. Okay. Again, don't have a preference. You could use either, but it's going to ask you some questions down here that say, if the client is a buyer, buyer agrees that the agent's principal broker, in addition to representing the client, may or may not, the seller may represent the seller and or another buyer in any transaction involving the client. Okay. And then if the client is the seller, by checking this box, blah, blah, blah. So I always check just this first box, and then I leave it ready for us to sign. Then going further down to the next document that I use. Come on now. There we go. This is a really important pamphlet, in my opinion. This is something that kind of covers your butt with everything you could possibly want to disclose to a seller. And so it's called the Oregon Property Sellers Advisory. And it is, I think it's like 40 some pages. Here's page 2, and it goes on and on. Yeah. Here's the table of contents. And oh, it's 23 pages. Sorry. I was thinking it was longer than that. So we can go down through, and it talks about all of these things. Actually, let me go back up here to the table of contents. It talks about listing agreements, offering buyer's agent compensation, all square footage, contingencies, escrow. So it educates your client, and it's a way for you to put one document in front of them and then confirm that they've received this document. And it allows them to then go home and read it if they want to. But that way you've pushed in front of them all of the basically advisories you would give a seller before listing their home. So this would be a huge, now this one is not required. This is not, doesn't have to be in your checklist, but it's one that I highly advise you use. Okay. It's broken out into different sections. The first section is listing the property for sale. The second section, whoops, is advisories related to purchase and sale agreements. Whoops, that's the third section. Sorry, I'm going a little too fast. Section 1, section 3. How does it jump to 3? Huh. Advisories relating to sale agreements. And then section 4, other important advisories and additional information. That must be there must be another, huh. I have never noticed that before, just noticing it now. All right, so anyway, that is 23 pages. And then on the very last page is the opportunity for your client to sign right here. And it basically has this seller acknowledgement. Seller acknowledged receipt of this advisory, blah, blah, blah. And seller should read this entire document before writing or accepting an offer or counter offer. So it's a nice jumping off point for seller questions. And it would be something that I would refer to if I was a brand new agent and wasn't sure. It would be just like everything that we ask our sellers to read, we should read, right? We should be familiar with the document and be able to explain it. So as people ask you questions, if you don't know the answer, you can say one of two things. Let me get back to you, go do some research, or, well, you know what? Let's open up the seller advisory and see what it says. You're not expected to remember everything, right? A lot of the stuff that they put in here is really basic common sense. Then we go on to the listing agreement. That's obviously something we want to have. There it is, listing agreement. As you go through in a template, if you fill this out ahead of time in the template side of things, then every time you pull up that template, these sections are filled out for you. Isn't that nice? So you don't have to fill them out over and over again when you're doing, say, 6 or 20 listing sets of paperwork. Now, here's a couple things that I'm going to point out to you. Is your name goes here, okay? So that would be your agent name. As soon as you click on there, it's going to open this extra page, and it's going to allow you to fill this in as it's needed. Once you save that, then it's going to fill that same information on other pages, kind of like the contracts do in SkySlope in general, okay? A couple things I'm going to point out is your principal broker's name is mine. So your name would go on the top line. Okay, your name would go in this section. And then my name goes here. And then this, even though that's not my cell phone, that's my direct office number. which rings the phone over here in the office. I don't want to give out my cell phone to every single one of our sellers and buyers. I would rather, if they have a concern, they reach out, or their attorney reaches out, hopefully never their attorney, but would reach out to that phone number and leaves a voicemail. On that voicemail is my cell phone number. So, and here's the thing too, is at any time I could pass away, we want people to be able to contact at any time I could pass away. That's kind of, what's the word I'm looking
Oh,
for?
man.
Sad. But that number stays true, right? My cell phone number, I could change that, or maybe I could leave the company. We want to give the company's principal broker number, which is that number right here in the office. Okay. So that's why we would put that number on the official documents. This is hard to read because our company's office name is so large, but that's all the space they give us. And so when you type it in, I type it in as short as I can do it with NW instead of Northwest Real Estate, but that's how it comes out. It is legible. So, and then for myself on this line, on line 15, agents, this is extra agents. This isn't your name again. This would be like if you're on a team or if you're co-listing your property with another agent's name goes. So Carol Hoyer and myself, we are a team. My name goes on the top, hers goes on there. When she lists a property, her name goes on top and my name goes there. Okay. So the lead agent is always the broker, and then the other assisting agents go, it could be, and there we do have teams in our offices where there's 2 or 3 names here. And the whole point of that is because when a seller has a contract, they need to know every name that they're working with. Even if it's somebody that's doing paperwork behind the scenes, they need to know who's involved in my transaction, who's going to be seeing everything that I sign. Okay. Now, what it also says in this section is that, let's say that you end up in the hospital. We as the principal broker, myself as the principal broker and us as the brokerage, we can then assign your file to another agent in our office if necessary. And this actually has happened. Like life circumstances come along and people go into the hospital or people pass away. And so it allows us as a brokerage to say, hey, we need another agent to step in, because we always have to be looking out for the fiduciary duty of the clients, right? So even though you're their agent, we as a brokerage, and actually every contract is signed with the brokerage. You're the representative of the brokerage. So in here, you can check off boxes, and anything that you pre-assign, like I put in how much my commission normally is. And if this box is checked, if I'm covering both sides, then my commission goes up. Now, these are not standards. There is no standard in the industry. So you set your own standard, your commission and your worth. You could write in 4.5% there. You could write in 5% there. You could write in 2 or 2.5%. You decide what your value is, and that's what I always present as my value. If I feel like I need to adjust that during the negotiations of signing that listing contract, sometimes I do concede those things. And that's where I think it's very professional to actually say, well, gosh, the contract says 3.5%, but if you're saying that you found somebody else that can work for cheaper, and can do all of these things, you know what? I don't want to lose your business. I'm going to scratch this out. We're going to write in 3% instead of 3.5%. They instantly see massive value in that they're getting a better deal, but still retaining the same exact services. And so you both then initial next to any changes that are crossed out in the contract. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So any changes that we make to a contract after signatures or anything that we maybe forgot or passed by, we really don't want to leave any blanks, but it does happen on occasion. We all make mistakes. Anytime we re-add something after a signed document has been signed, we have to go back and both parties have to initial that. Moving on, the residential listing input. Now you'll see that this is a Oregon Realtors form. We can use that in conjunction with an RMLS form simply because this is data input, right? RMLS is the place in which we're putting that data, and so we have to use their form. So this is a 7-page document in which we put in all the details as to the listing. I don't pre-populate anything in this because every listing is different to me. Advertising authorization, this is a Berkshire Hathaway specific document, okay? And I don't pre-populate anything in this except for I do choose to check a box that seller is not, but I do have that conversation about, do you opt to consider offering a 2.5 BAC? We can do that, but most often I'm finding a lot of folks are opting not to consider offering compensation unless it's negotiated once a contract is received. So again, there's no standard in this, but there are, as you learn how to run your business, there may be places where hey, I'm going to pre-check this box or that box because that's normally what I check. Doesn't mean I might change it later and initial next to it, so on and so forth. Mediation and arbitration. This is the document that really we don't add anything. We're just going to sign it later, but it does need to be a part of my listing packet. Affiliated business arrangement disclosure statement. This is really important. Anytime we're working with other parties or other companies, we need to disclose that up front. That's what this whole section within this document explains, and we have our clients sign that. The anti-fraud disclosure to the consumers. All 4 of these, from this one to this one to this one to this one, these are all Berkshire Hathaway specific. Okay, anti-fraud is the 4th of that series of documents that are all Berkshire Hathaway specific, and we have our clients sign that as well. Now, of course, with any listing, we're going to have our seller fill out a property disclosure, right? And there are rare circumstances that a seller gets exclusions, and that is right here in this section. And we have to read and understand verbatim, is this explaining this correctly? The one I see most often missed is when a seller is a appointed personal representative, but they're not a court-appointed personal representative. There are a lot of people that are allowed to sell a property on behalf of another person. This only gets an exclusion if they are a court-appointed. Right here, it says court-appointed personal representative. So if somebody is a PR and they are helping another person in their family, it could be something like that, they do not get this exclusion. They still have to fill out all of the pages as though they are the seller, even if they haven't lived in the home, because one of the persons that is selling the home has lived in it, and usually the personal representative can ask that person those questions. And the good thing is a disclosure has 3 answers to it, right? It has a yes, no, or unknown. So if, let's say, I'll give a scenario, like let's say there's one living parent, that parent is in a nursing home and maybe they have dementia, and there's a personal representative that has been assigned to sell this property for them. Now, they're not court appointed, but they are a personal representative. That means they have to fill out this whole document because they're not court appointed. They were appointed by an attorney and that particular person. Now, that person has never lived in the home. They may not know very much about the home. And so they can answer yes to the questions that they know, yes. They can answer no to the questions they can firmly answer no. And the good thing is that they can answer unknown to anything that they don't know the answer. They don't know if it's yes or no, right? So a lot of times I'll see personal representatives, and we are not to guide our clients and tell them, oh yeah, on this question, you should answer yes, or you should answer no. Our job is to put this in front of them and say, let me know if you have any questions about the understanding of the question. I can't help you answer yes or no. I can't give you that answer. That can only come from you as the seller. But if you don't know, if you're not 100% yes or you're not 100% no, then you're unknown. You're not sure. And so that's where I would encourage you to check that box if you're not sure about the answer. And so really the point of seller property disclosures is to allow the buyer to not spend a bunch of money on inspections until they already can kind of dig into the seller's mind as to what they know about the property themselves. And that way, really our job is to sign a sale agreement after the listing's been taken. and then immediately provide those seller property disclosures from the seller directly to the buyer. That goes through us as agents, but when that does pass to the buyer now has an opportunity to read through all those questions and decide, gosh, I really like this property, but I don't like the answer to this question. That's a reason I don't want to buy the property. Now they can reject the sale agreement based on the seller's property disclosures and not have to end up spending money and find out the answer to that question is exactly the same as what the seller disclosed on the seller's disclosures. Okay, so really important to have these seller property disclosures completely filled out before you start receiving offers. Okay, so before you go live, you really should have this filled out and tell your seller it's important, right? We want to disclose what you know about the property ahead of time. And sometimes people will even ask for those sellers disclosures before they write an offer. Now, a part of the contract is that we will, once you have mutual acceptance, we'll then provide them to them. But it's not uncommon for a buyer to ask for those seller property disclosures up front. It saves everybody time by having everything transparent and out in the open before so it's Carol and I sometimes we even will attach those disclosures to the listing contract, or I'm sorry, to the listing in RMLS. Now, only other agents have access to that information, so it's not like they're receiving that information, and those signed documents are not going out to the general public. They're only in the hands of other agents, passing them along to their clients. Any questions about seller property disclosures? Okay. The next disclosure is lead-based paint. When does lead-based paint apply?
76?
Nope. 1978.
8.
That's our cutoff. Structures built before 1978. Okay, has it there on the first couple lines of the seller property disclosure. And it says this lead-based paint addendum must be part of every real estate agreement for the sale of property containing one or more structures built before 1978, currently used or intended for use as a residence. So this does not apply to a 1978 commercial property. It only applies to a residential property built before 1978. It has sections filled out that the seller fills out. It's the seller's disclosure up here. And then the buyer's acknowledgement when you fill this out for your, I'm sorry, not when you fill it out for your buyer fills it out and signs it, but they are going to answer some questions. Buyer acknowledge receipt of this above, okay? B, if seller has selected item 3B1. So only if the seller has selected 3B1, which seller has provided buyer with all available records, okay? I don't see this box checked very often. More often than not, seller has no records or reports. And so when a seller checks this box, number 3B.2, then that means there really should be no initials here by the buyer because they did not select 3B1. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to decide, are we receiving a 10-day calendar or are they waiving the opportunity? And let's move on. Another disclosure is siding disclosure. Now, a lot of agents don't provide these. Carol and I choose to on all of our listings simply because we're not siding experts. We know that there are still plenty of homes out there that have LP siding on them. And so we'd like the seller to disclose what they know about their own siding. And so this is just some simple questions, yes, no, or unknown. They fill that out and then they sign it and they pass it along to the other party. There's an advisory regarding smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. This is something we've had in ours for years, and actually it's something I think we're gonna probably here in 2026 probably take out, because up here sometimes we overdo it, right, in disclosures, but up here in Oregon property seller advisory, there is a section about smoke alarms, and I'm almost positive it is in this section. Yep, right here. So it's page 18. So we're already disclosing to our sellers about smoke alarms. So we really, in my opinion, you could use this advisory regarding smoke carbon monoxide alarms. It breaks it down into one page, which is kind of nice, but you don't have to, okay? It's also nice in that it kind of gives some phone numbers and some direct information as to where they can find information about statutes and stuff like that. Here's another form that I've added in. You can't find this within our documents, but this is a document that I've found with the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. And it was basically an educational piece, I would call it, a flyer that basically says Oregon carbon monoxide alarm law requirements when selling or renting a home. So it educates our client about the CO2 alarms. I also add into, now that's the end of what I would recommend for a listing packet. A lot of forms there, right? But at the very end, I added in a few forms that are specific to our team. I'm happy to pass these out to anybody that asks for them, but I don't just pass them out to the whole office when they don't ask for them. The first thing that I add to our listing packet is new client expectation and assessment. This is an 8-page document that is just question after question, and it really helps to lead a great discussion with your clients as far as what are they looking for. You get them to think about moving forward, and then also what is important to them in life right now and why are they selling this property. So it asks a whole lot of different questions, and it has even sections in here about, do you have any questions for me? Let me write them down. Let's list them out. And then at the end, I always go back to this page and say, have we answered all your questions? I also gather information about who do they know, because if I can, from a listing, I've actually picked up more business from listing appointments because I ask for other professionals. Who is it that you use as a financial planner? And then I'll put down that person's name, their phone number. I'll call them after the listing appointment and say, hey, you know what? I just sat down with John and Julie Smith, and they just couldn't say enough about you as their financial planner. Would you like to go for coffee sometime? And it starts a relationship with somebody else that potentially could lead to more business, right? Business comes from conversations, and so I encourage you to always ask those type of questions. Now, sometimes I don't have enough time to ask for these, so I'll skip over sections like this. I always ask things about, do they have any financial concerns? Because sometimes things don't come to light as to why they're selling a property unless you ask the right questions. And so, especially in harder times when the economy is not as great, we have people that are close to foreclosure. They maybe missed a couple payments. And if you don't ask the right questions, you don't know that information. So we ask about those type of things. Do you have any financial concerns at this point? Any fears in this process of buying or selling a home? When you ask certain questions like that and just shut up, a lot of times people will just all of a sudden open up because you've asked the question. So this has a lot of good questions, and it has some reminders as to, did you get our service pledges? Did you get our brokerage commitment? Is it okay that I be honest with you? There's some obvious questions that we ask them that they're of course going to say yes to, right? But it helps to build trust. And these are the questions that I like to use to help educate and lead a person through a conversation. Lots of questions, 8 pages of this stuff. I also take people through, because even though we're listing the property, we're going to go through the home buying process with a buyer, right? And likely when people sell their property, they're also then going to go and buy a property. So you might as well start talking about it now. What does the process look like for buying a house? What's I call it an A through M. M is in Mary, because I've got an A, B, C, D, all the way down to M, when the loan funds deed records and you get the keys and get your, so these are all the steps that we have to go through. This is why you're hiring me. Again, added value, helping them to understand my job's not easy. I actually have a quite difficult job, and all of this stuff, I could get all the way to and then realize that you don't like this home and we get to start all over. And I still don't earn a dime until we close on the property. So I'm taking a lot of risk by working with you, and that's why I require a contract in signing to be able to work with you. And sometimes you view properties, get an offer accepted, and then you sometimes you circle in this area D through G with people 3, 4, 5 times. I've done that in my career where, gosh, we didn't get, it didn't pass inspection or didn't pass appraisal. We have to move on to another property. Okay. So this is a one pager that I created myself. It helps to explain when they need to have money up front, which is like earnest money, when they need to pay for a home inspection, when they pay through a home appraisal through their lender. Sometimes lenders charge for a credit report. All things that the client needs to know I need to have money up front for. And then the last one I have is the very last thing is, hey, read this at your leisure. I don't like to tout about myself, but my clients are my resume. And here's my experience level. Here's where my approach comes from, what I do for you. And then here's some testimonials from people that have worked for me and all the kind things that they say and stuff like that. So anytime you can have somebody else speak on your behalf, even if it is on a piece of paper, that's of value. And people say, oh gosh, if they're going to treat all these people like that, they're going to treat me like that. And so that is my listing appointment or my listing
Template.
template. Thank you. It's like brain fart there. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the listing template. We will go over the buyer template another time, just so that we have enough time if you guys have any questions. And I'm just kind of tired of talking at this point. So we're going to pause there. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing and we can see each other. Did that all make sense? Does it make sense, the documents that we have and why we're using them?
And then you can just select that template when you have a new client and
Yeah.
all your forms are ready to go.
Super easy, yeah. And on occasion, you'll take a paper out or you add a paper in, depending on if it's a condo, right? I would take out the maybe add a condo advisory or how to work with HOAs, those kind of things, right? There's a lot of documents in there, and that's where unfortunately it just comes with experience. You're like, and that's why we have you guys with mentors as new agents, is we want you to say, hey, this particular listing, it's not a house, it's just bare land. And so what would I do differently on this listing than I would do on a regular residential property? Any other questions?
Is all this recorded, Trevor, so I can watch this again when I'm actually
Yes.
going through the form?
Yeah, you can pause, you'll be
Okay.
able to pause through this, and I also will send out some notes. Hopefully it'll type up some concise note. It just won't be a whole